Welcome, everyone, to In the Driver's Seat, the podcast that's all about exploring how to improve the value of your business. We're all about helping business owners positioning themselves ultimately to build a valuable, successful company that they can exit when they decide to. My name is Simon Zryd. Together with Steven Kohnke, we're business partners at Denver Business Coach, and we're co-hosting this podcast together. We are both certified exit planning advisors, certified value builders, have worked within this field of exit planning and value building for close to a decade now. We have an amazing team with us as well of 8 advisors that are really have all owned their own business and have successfully sold their business as well. The purpose of our podcast, as always, is to bring this conversation to business owners much sooner than when they're actually deciding to sell, because there are some statistics that we're on a mission to turn around. And with that, I turn it over to Steven. Steven, what statistics are we talking about?
All right. For anyone who has been listening, you should be able to recite these by now. And it's
Mm-hmm.
3 out of 4 businesses that go to sell do not sell. And that statistic combined with, anywhere from 70 to 90% of a business owner's wealth, overall wealth, is tied up in that business. That's more than not likely to sell, or more likely than not to sell. Anyway, that's a pretty big risk that we saw. So we are trying to bring this conversation to business owners of all sizes of what makes a business valuable, and how to best prepare for your exit at all points of growth.
Yeah, I loved at, I think it was one of our last episodes where we talked about not having this be a one-time conversation at the very end of your journey of business ownership, but actually having this something where at least once a quarter you're having intentional conversation around, do I want to keep building my business or am I ready to work towards an exit? And
Mhm.
the more that is just part of your day-to-day thinking, or at least quarterly thinking, the more um, the value building aspect of things just becomes a natural lens through which you're looking at your business, through which you're making strategic decision. You understand whether or not what you're choosing to do is moving you closer to a valuable business. And anyway, really resonated with me that fact of like, let's have that be an ongoing conversation versus just a one time. What's my business worth and how soon can I sell it? Yeah, yeah. So with that, today we have interesting topics. So we're actually starting a new kind of like segment or a series of podcasts that are more geared toward what I would say the human side of business ownership. And we have in the past talked a lot about metrics, value drivers, KPIs, tangible and intangible ways to build the value of a company. But we've always assumed the owner is just like this machine that's just an excellent executor that you just need to say, here's the plan, what you need to do, go do and go forth and prosper.
Yeah.
The reality is a little different. Obviously, anyone that owns a business knows that business ownership is can be extreme, can be very, I think, emotionally taxing, and we're going to explore a little bit how we can show up strong as leaders and humans in what we know we need to execute upon. So, with that, Stephen, let's talk a little bit about what do we know about the makeup of business owners. Like it takes a certain type of person to be a business owner, right? Um, and there have been some studies done as well.
Mhm.
So, what's your take on how would we profile most business owners?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've actually been asked that question once or twice, just in terms of, you know, what are those personality traits in a way, I guess, that contribute to a higher likelihood of entrepreneurship. Um, and one of the words that's been thrown around a lot, I think, when this is talked about is grit, the ability to persevere through adversity, through one of our topics is really riding the waves and the highs of lows of emotionally of being a business owner, and being able to and in relation to grit, being able to navigate those ups and downs and still persevere and deal with it and continue to push through and grow.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the more important traits that if we're as an observer have seen contribute to people who actually become successful long term with
Yeah,
entrepreneurs.
yeah. I think I've seen that as well. As we talk about, like, in a certain way, the business is your baby, but then we also talk about a business is not your baby. You have to separate yourself from it. But as you're starting out, like, there is this level of ultimate responsibility. Like, you're the buck stops here. You're like the last line of defense. If something is due tomorrow and it's not done, you're staying up till 2 a.m. to get it done, whatever. And an employee could not relate to that. Like, there's a certain person as an employee, I'm like, it's 5 o'clock. I can add another hour or two if I absolutely have to. I'll make it up next week. But that's about the extent of, like, I think, commitment that I don't want to generalize too much, but there is, let's just leave the employee on the side, but let's just talk about the business owner, that grit, that showing up no matter what, that quality that they're bringing forth. Um, I've also, I think that's a good segue into, though, grit comes with opportunity cost,
Mhm. Oh
right?
yeah.
Like, it's, especially when a business is starting out, it is what is needed more often than not is that grit, but it also comes with, you know, I think there's a study we might highlight in a moment, but, like, business owners are higher prone towards depression, ADHD, anxiety, um, like the high level of stress that people are experiencing. And um, that is a reality that a lot of business owners are dealing with as well, right? And it's like the dark side of the coin, or the other side of the coin, is it takes something to persevere in both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's it can be, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it probably with yourself, certainly with clients, as I have. Uh, the I would say let's call it an emotional roller coaster of just that you go through owning a business. There's a fun graphic um, that's been thrown around for a few years that I've used in presentations before, and it's just a mountain peak of ups and downs of like, I feel awesome. And it's like the world sucks, and it's like, oh yeah, something good happened, and then it's just like I hate everything. It's just this
Total
up and
failure.
down,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah.
And it's real. I mean, that's a real roller coaster of what's going on, and it's dictated by, in a lot of cases, how the business is going. You win a big client, you're way up there. You're having a great day, and then the next day, your second biggest client leaves. Says, "Hey, I'm done." And then you're like way down in the dumps again, and considering what it's worth and all the. So I mean, being able to kind of bringing it back to the grit thing, being able to help um, even out some of those extreme highs and extreme lows um, can be really beneficial, I would say.
Yeah. I One of the things, about our job, yeah, there is a certain consulting and advising that we're doing, that is about figuring out, current state, desired future state, coming up with the strategy around it. That is very, I don't want to say linear, but it's black and white. You're here in order to get here. You need to meet these numbers, and you it's almost like a formula. You need to figure out where your business needs to be, and and to a certain extent, you can even map out what the action steps are theoretically that need to happen to accomplish to get there. And but then as an owner, right, you're in this predicament of you're not a perfect executor. You're not a there is what to do, and then there is who are we being as we're executing. You can make 100 dials, but if you're in a shitty if you have a shitty attitude, if you're not inspiring, motivated, whatever, yeah, you did the 100 dials, but did you did it create the results? The best results? No, because you didn't bring your your best to the table. And I think a lot of the second part or the more hidden part of our role is helping owners find that where they're situated within and finding that right pace to be able to consistently show up because it's exhausting being on that roller coaster high and low and you ultimately, and I don't think it's healthy. I mean, there's both there, and you don't want to be like just flat and boring, but you got to find something that's sustainable for a long term, right? And
Right.
um, so anyway, so with that, what are some of the ways when we're saying, okay, if we know that that's a reality, that we're
Mhm.
exposed to that, and now we're kind of like moving back and we're the observer of ourselves and saying, okay, how can I show up differently? What do I need to do so that I, as a business owner, I'm not necessarily falling prey or victim to these extreme ups and downs, but can show up differently? What kind of advice do you give owners there?
That's a hard one too. I mean, it's a natural progression, I think, of being human too, of really going through those highs and lows. I think part of uh, mitigating just the emotional and mental exhaustion of having such extreme highs and lows and very close together too. I think way closer together than non-entrepreneurs have.
Mm-hmm.
They might be everyone experiences highs and lows, but an entrepreneur could experience their highest high and their lowest low in the same day.
Because you're like on all frontiers. One is payroll, one is sales, one is HR. You're exposed to like every aspect of it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and exactly, and I think it's having the emotional awareness of something like that. I think is so key to being able to say, um, not let it get under your skin, I guess might be a way to put it. And that probably takes a lot of practice, and I think there's some innateness that comes along with it. But having someone to talk to as well, that's a role that we play as well of trying if our clients are coming to a meeting, a conversation on one of those highs or lows, like being able to help regulate to a degree
Mhm.
uh, and see some things. Yeah, it just help regulate, I guess, a
Yeah.
little bit more
I
to that.
think because we're in it right in the beginning, I do want to say we all, to some extent, identify as I am the business, right? Like it's a
Yeah.
rare business owner that's really maybe it's their third business that they've launched and they have a healthy separation. But in the beginning, it's like your blood, sweat, and tears in there, your money's in there, your success, everything is tied into it. So you really feel like you're fully you're fully in it, you're fully immersed, you're it. And so you take everything really personal, more
Mhm.
so than if you were just pretend you're an investor in your company and it's like, okay, we had a bad day or a client quit or something, but you're
Mhm.
like way more removed from it. And I think what was one of those quotes like, no business is ever as great as the owner feels it or as bad as the owner feels it at any
Yeah.
given point, right? Like we have a tendency to to go to the extreme. I think so. Anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And
so
the objectivity, I think, for owners to be looking at their business, I think is a really big thing to call out. Which what you were talking about is, I forget the exact phrasing of the question, but it's, do you consider yourself a business owner or do you consider yourself someone who owns a business? I think it sounds almost the same if you're not keen to what the difference is, but it can be such a huge psychological difference that can help temper a lot of those ups and downs that someone can feel like you said, oh, it's a bad day, that happens,
yeah,
or
yeah,
it's a good, let's celebrate and then get back to it.
yeah. Thinking about it also in longer time frames, I think helps because there are distinct stages that a business goes through, and there's emotional stages an owner goes through, and like financial stages you go through as well, and like understanding where you're at in the journey kind of
Mhm.
like helps you to be like, okay, I'm right now sales is the most important thing, and so therefore I'm more impacted what's happening on the sales side versus further down that might not be, it might be an employee quitting. We just had a client who went through onboarding a new employee, which great opportunity and great potential assets to the team. And within the first 2 weeks, something happened and needed to quit.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's hard. And you put all the prep work in, and you're already money cost into it by um, onboarding, training, changing processes, all of that. And
And you're that emotional side of it too, of getting excited about bringing a new person on, what that opportunity could bring, and then getting hit with it's not happening anymore, or at
yeah,
least not
yeah,
moment in time.
yeah. So, so far we've talked about being able to zoom out, being more objective, and that often can happen through conversation. It's hard to do it by yourself, right? But if you're talking to a friend, or if you have an advisor or a coach or someone else to just get a different perspective, and you're separating yourself from being in the business to like looking at it. We often talk about. So that was one thing we've talked about. Um, the second thing is what I would maybe highlight is the we talk about looking at your business as an asset. Like I am the business versus the business is an asset you own. And
Mhm.
again, it's a mindset shift, but it helps if you own several businesses because then it's a matter of fact. But it kind
Yeah,
of like just knowing that you're separate from the business and the business is here and you're
yeah,
just helping it. And that perspective change helps a lot to stay more equiposed, I think. Um,
absolutely. I think that's one of them, a very key point.
yeah. Um, I think the other thing, maybe we'll zoom into to one more and then we'll continue next week, would be sometimes it's just helpful to know that we have biases,
Yeah,
right? Like, so what is it? Like, no one wants their kid to be like the ugliest kid. I
yeah,
don't know if it's a good example. But but we always, I talked a little bit about this, we always feel like we have the best business or however we look at things, we have to understand that that there is a bias inherently there's a bias. And in that knowing, I think then through conversation, we can again mitigate how personal we take things or the impact that an extreme might have because we're always gonna um I think over amplify it. I don't know if does that make sense what I'm saying or is it
yeah. It's we see it a lot with business owners. We hear stories from our broker partners of business owners drastically overvaluing their company. I think that's kind of the point here of everything that they've done, they put a value. Everything that they've built, everything that they've grown, everything they've invested in, blood, sweat, and tears, and they're putting values on that. So they may not know where value comes from in that way, so they're putting value in things where things may not have true value. So, I mean, having the objectivity of bringing in some sort of valuation, assessment, or and getting a better understanding if we're looking at the lens of business having value, someone growing it, getting the objectivity of that, I think grounds people in a way. They may not believe the person or the second person or the third person, but if people keep saying the same thing in objectivity, that's why I love assessments is they're objective in a way.
Mhm.
So being able to put those in front of business owners to clearly see this is where it is, I think will help regulate that as well,
Yeah, yeah.
and steer clear of that taking too big of offense when someone says this isn't good or whatever.
Yeah, because a lot of the emotions, right, are a reaction to something good or to something bad.
Right.
Um, and so if there's a criticism, then we're getting super defensive about
Mhm.
something. Or if we get praise, then we're like, wow. But understanding, like you're saying, the objectivity and understanding that um, I think what I want to say is so understanding that it's that we're over interpreting the extremes is one thing, but like your
Mhm.
point, objectivity, um, like just being really curious. I do think being curious in this conversation helps from being too reactive because it
Mhm.
kind of like pauses from okay, there's a trigger event and now I'm spiking one way or the other. Just being curious helps you to be more centered and present and be like, isn't that interesting? Wow, I've never thought about it. And it kind of keeps you more centered versus just going off because something good or bad happened.
Right.
Um, and like having that, if it's bad, like being able to really quickly be like, okay, what am I learning in this? I mean, it's not about like denying an emotion, but it's about
Mhm.
being able to get back on the horse
Mhm.
as quickly as possible and be like, okay, I'm in the second stage of my business, or I'm in this stage. This is what I'm supposed to be learning here. This is a perfect example. Okay, and kind of like bringing yourself back to center. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
That's good. No, that's a good point. The objectivity of it, being curious, I think is a really good way to combat against that bias of
yeah,
I think the best thing in the world.
yeah,
Uh, and just saying, what do you think about this? And being genuinely curious, not loading that up, saying,
exactly.
wanting to hear what you want to hear.
Yeah, not just seeking out validation of what you believe is true about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
There's a real term for that. It's called confirmation bias.
but
Is
yeah, exactly.
deny everything that doesn't align with your beliefs and accept everything that does, and which
Even if
is
it's just a kernel in some magazine stacked away in the back corner.
great. I saw this one
Yes.
article over here. There
Yeah,
must be.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Okay, so there is further to go. I think, some of
Mhm.
the conversation we do want to go zoom into is, for example, importance of community.
Mhm.
Um, I think that is a really big thing. And then um, beyond that, I think also understanding what is really important to you. So, in
Mhm.
the absence of having a true north that's like further out, everything is extreme. But if you put it into perspective of something that's further out, you can somehow have a relationship to it, and it helps you again staying more centered. Also, I think the important for playtime, the importance for some time away from the business are all helping you to, at the end of the day, stay as centered as you can as you're going through it. So we'll zoom into these more in our next episodes. Thank you to our listeners. Hope you enjoyed it, and look forward to talking with you next week.
Roxanne, thanks.
Thank you.